Hey, welcome to this episode of My Friends, Their Stories. My name is Bonnie Tilly, your host, and today joining me on the couch is Mallory Baker, or as we like to call her, Mal B. Hey, Mal B.
Hi, Bonnie.
Welcome to the couch.
Thank you.
So, how you feeling about this?
I'm feeling good.
Okay, excellent. So, we're just going to tell your story.
Okay.
All right. So, tell me a little bit. I don't think a lot of people know kind of about Mal B as a kid. So, can you tell us a little bit about kind of where you grew up, your family, stuff like that?
Okay. So, I was born in North Carolina.
Okay.
Lived there my whole life until 19. As a kid, I was really into gymnastics. Like, that was my whole life. There was a point where I was training like 20 to 30 hours a week, just going really hardcore into competitive gymnastics.
And so what was your goal? Were you trying to get to the Olympics or?
So at first, when I first started, when I was 4 or 5, around there, that was my goal. And I was doing artistic gymnastics, which is what people think of, and then I switched to trampoline and tumbling when I was 13 because I wanted to not train as intensely. I kind of put aside that Olympic dream to regain the love of gymnastics.
So if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying is you trained so intensely and you put so much into it that you started to lose love of it a little bit.
So
I understand that.
It was like I hated it and loved it at the same time.
Got you. And then, so when you were in middle school, how did those kind of middle school, high school years go for you?
For me, those were not good times in my life.
Oh, no. Can you talk about it a little bit?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
Yeah, so there was a lot going on in my life, and I had, from as long as I could remember, just had so much like social anxiety, to the point where I wouldn't even say I had any friends. There were people I would occasionally talk to, but I didn't talk to anyone. So it was a very rough time in my life. At the same time, my parents got divorced in the middle of this.
Wow.
Which caused a lot of, like, extra hardship on the mental illness side of things I was dealing with. So I found a lot of my outlet during those years in my writing. So that's when I began writing music.
Okay, we're going to talk about that in a second. So,
Yes.
But before we talk about that, can you tell us a little bit about social anxiety? Like, how did that present itself for you?
So it presented as just being so scared to even just talk to people, even the point of saying hello, making eye contact, being even around people. So I would avoid extra, like, events outside of the things, like, I had to go to class at school.
Sure.
And then I was still going to gymnastics practice at the time, but that was, like, a safe space for me. But I would avoid any other things that would be around people.
So you isolated yourself
Yes.
pretty much. And so, and then your parents got divorced, so that just added another layer
Yes.
onto
and
all of that.
When that happened, I had, like, one really good friend at the time, who I had known forever, so I didn't really have the, like, anxiety with her. But when that happened with my parents, I distanced myself from her as well, just as a result. So it ended up of me spending a lot of time alone, like, pretty much my whole high school.
Wow.
Yeah.
So a time when really we're making friends and we're connecting with people, that was a kind of a really isolated time for you.
Yes, it was.
And then you say you used that time, or that was a way that you got into your writing. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I had so many emotions inside of me. Some of them, I don't know that I could have verbalized, like, if I talked about them, but a way that I could kind of deal with them was to write it all out, write how I felt into a song. Most of the stuff that I wrote at the beginning is very, like, depressing.
Dark.
Dark.
Yeah.
But it helped me to kind of process
Yeah.
what was going on in my head, because I didn't have anybody to process that with otherwise.
And so is that the way that you kind of healed from some of your social anxiety, or did it just kind of maybe put a little Band-Aid on it and you forgot about it a little bit? Like, how did that play out?
It kind of put a Band-Aid on it because I wasn't spiraling so much when I was alone, but I was still avoiding all the, like, social things. But even though it was putting a Band-Aid on it, it was still leading me deeper and deeper into other things. So I ended up getting diagnosed with OCD. And so then it became like obsessions about just little things, just trying to find some kind of control that I felt like was lacking.
So OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yes.
So what did you do specifically? Can you share a little bit about?
So certain things were, I would check everything. So if I walked out of my door in my room, I would walk back in, make sure the door was closed, leave, go down the stairs, walk back up, open and close the door again to make sure it was actually closed. Same thing with, like, locking things.
Yes.
So a lot of those, like, and even though rationally kind of in your head you're like, I know I did this, it is like this it was an intense fear of, like, something will go completely wrong if I don't go back up there and make sure I did it, even though I already went back up there to make sure I did it.
Like, my world's gonna crumble if
yes.
I don't check this.
And people use, like, OCD to say stuff about, like, they want the pictures straight on the wall and that kind of thing. But which I also, like, those little things
that was a part of
were part of it. But if it's more the feeling of, like, if you don't do certain things, then everything is just going to crumble, you're going to die, like...
So you live with a fear almost,
same thing with, like, counting things. So if I brushed my hair on this side 10 times, then it needed to be 10 times on this side. If I accidentally did 11, then I had to go back on this side.
Wow.
Same thing, like, mascara, like...
So it kind of consumed your life.
Yes.
What did you do to try to help heal from those things?
So I started getting really deep into my music, and I felt like that if I could just get some kind of success with my music in the entertainment industry, then I would be happy, or everything would be fine, all of this would go away. And so I ended up doing that, and I got involved with, when I was 19, I got involved with an entertainment company for music, acting, and dance.
Okay, and so just to go back before we go forward, when we say music, we're talking about...
Rap.
Rap, right.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're not... People are probably like, oh, she's a singer. Well, no, yes. She's a rapper. Okay, so I wanted to go ahead and say that. Go ahead, keep going.
So I got involved with an entertainment company, mainly for music, but I was also doing acting and dance. And so I ended up moving to Atlanta on my own, away from all of my family, which was another thing I thought was going to solve my problems.
Sure.
Which was, if I get away from what I feel like is causing my problems, then it'll be better. Yeah. But all I did was move my problems to another state.
They went with you.
Yes.
Because they were you. I got you.
Yeah. And so I did that. For a while, that was great. But I started to realize, like, it wasn't everything. It was, like...
Cracked up to me, they say. Yeah, for lack of a better way to say it.
And I started feeling like I was... just the way that I was treated by some of the people that were supposed to be, like, helping me...
Yes.
...was not conducive to my... mental state at the time, as well as, even though I would get these opportunities that would be what most people would be, like, celebrating, being in the room with, like, people that people, like, dream of meeting, you would think that's what I thought I wanted. That's what I thought would make everything better.
Sure.
But I would go home after those things, and it would be even worse because I felt like it's like I have all this, and why do I still feel empty?
So you meet this friend named Noah during your time with another performance-based company. How does he play into your story?
When I moved to Georgia, Noah would mention church sometimes to me.
Now, had you been to church at all before that, or
Yes.
what was your...
I had been to church pretty much all my life, but it was very much, we do this on Sundays, because that's what you do on Sundays, and then the rest of your week
You lived however you wanted?
is just not like purposefully like we're going to ignore God, but there was things that didn't line up, and I just felt like Jesus was more, and God were more of like a history lesson than like a personal relationship or
okay.
like a friend or a father. So I knew some stories, but I just didn't know the like power and the love
Okay.
of God.
So Noah's mentioning church to you, and you
Yes.
are resistant? You're thinking
Yes.
about it? Tell me.
So he's mentioning it to me when I moved down here. And I'm like, no, because also, like, the social anxiety is still very much there. And, like, how am I going to walk into, like,
A place with a bunch of
And
people.
I know when you go, most churches, like, when you go, there's people greeting you. They're all trying to talk to you. And I was like, no.
If it's your first time, stand up. Sometimes they do that.
Stuff like that. And so,
That's hilarious.
so I'm like, I'll think about it, because I don't want to be, like, rude. I feel like it's rude if I'm just like, no.
Sure.
So, but, like, I'm just thinking about how I'm not gonna go. Like,
excuses.
Yeah.
Okay.
And,
How do I let him down without hurting
and
him?
he really didn't mention it that much.
Sure.
But because it was eating at me so much, like, what I would say now in my spirit that I needed to go, I felt like he was asking me every day. But really, it was maybe once a month, if that.
Okay. You were getting convicted.
Yeah,
And when
I was
poor
just-
Noah was taking the blame.
And so then one day, he's like, I think you should go. This was before I even went to church. I think you should go to this retreat my church has called Encounter. And I'm like, if I'm not going to go to church, I'm not going to go to a retreat with them. Like, I'm not going to do that. And so I was like, but I was playing along. I was like, tell me a little bit about it. He sends me a video. The video was just a bunch of random things and then said the word encounter after. And I was like, that told me absolutely nothing. Because they don't tell you much about encounter before you go to encounter. So I was like, no, I don't think so. And he's like, I really think you should go. And I was like, no. And then so that was like, ended up being like a year more before I actually went to encounter.
So you finally get out of the company where you were pursuing your artistic dreams. With Noah's encouragement, do you finally find yourself running toward God?
I still didn't know God like that, so I didn't know what to run to. So I'm like, still trying to fill that empty void and the brokenness that I felt and fix it with something else. So I ended up turning to drugs and just ended up in like an abusive relationship, because you tend to, if you don't heal from things, just run to the same things with a different face.
Yeah.
And that's what I was doing by getting out of the company I was with, but like putting myself in another situation where I didn't need.
I always say you're on a merry-go-round, and if you don't get off, you're seeing the same scenery, right?
Yeah.
Just maybe it takes a different form, but it's the same scenery, yeah. So you leave the company, you kind of absorb that loss with other wrong relationships and information, and here's Noah saying, hey, come to Encounter. He was
like the only like person in my life at the time I felt wasn't trying to like, wasn't fake nice to me to get something.
Sure.
Everybody else was like their kindness needed something in return.
There were
and
strings
it wasn't
attached.
something that like
Yeah, there were strings attached.
yeah.
So, do you go to Encounter first, or do you go to the church first?
I went to church first, but I'm gonna back up just slightly.
Sure, please.
My first experience with the church was actually a game night with Noah's small group. Because I was feeling so convicted about the going to church, I felt like when he invited me to that, I'm like, maybe if I go to a game night, that's like really low key.
That's right.
And then he'll just stop, like,
you're like, I checked the list,
telling me about things because I went to an event. So I go, and the people there are like so nice, and they're all happy and laughing and smiling and talking to me, and I'm doing everything I can to like pretend like I am not like feeling like I'm going to like die and at the time and I left there thinking that is weird, like those people are weird.
So you go to this game night with how many people? Maybe
like 10
or so people, and
yes.
you they're kind and loving to you, and you're like, this is strange.
I'm like, this is weird because
you
I had never
experienced
people being just kind and loving for no
without wanting
reason.
Something.
And so I was like, this is weird. Like, I don't know what that is, but I can't deal with that. The like darkness in me couldn't take the light that they were giving. And but eventually, I'm gonna fast forward. It was like 8 months later or so. I hit like a rock bottom in my like mental health, just life in general.
Did it have to do with the relationship as well? Was that part of it?
That contributed to it, but it wasn't the only thing. By this point, I was out of that relationship. Mm-hmm. But I hit this rock bottom, and I had just asked for medical leave from my job to deal with my mental health. I was having to go back to North Carolina to stay with my mom just because, like, I was in that bad. And I didn't want to live anymore. Like, I was going to end it all. But the night that I was going to do that, it was 1:36 a.m. I know that because that's the time I sent the text. And something in me was like, you remember those people from that game
the kind people?
Like, that were happy and, like, loving? They're like, and it was like, that's what you've been searching for. Like, that's what you've been trying to run to all these things for. And I know now that what was telling me this was God, but I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah.
And I was just, it was this feeling of just text Noah and see what time church starts. And I was
so, is this a Saturday night or a Sunday morning at 1:36?
I think it's like a Friday night.
Wow. Okay.
It wasn't like the next day.
Sure.
But it was
close. Yeah.
And so I texted him at like this random time of night, like, and I was like, what time does church start? And he didn't like ask any questions of why I'm asking this at like this time. He just said 9 a.m. Will I see you there? And so I said yes. And so that Sunday I went to church, and it wasn't like a magical like.
It was pretty magical for Noah, I can imagine, when you were like, will I see you there? And you said yes.
It wasn't like a magical like turnaround in my life at that point.
How did you feel going into the church? Because we go to a church that has quite a bit of people, right? So if you're dealing with social anxiety, and we're very friendly people, right? And we hug everybody and we talk to everybody. How did that go for you?
So I would intentionally get there late, and Noah would save me a seat.
Yes.
And so I would get there late so that, like, the general population was already, like, in there. And I would go sit down there, and then after, I would walk straight out. And the only person I would talk to, I mean, if people said hi to me, I would say hi.
Sure.
But, like, intentionally talk to was Noah, but we would stand out, like, by one of our cars to talk, not
Yes.
in where everybody was. And, but I remember that first time I went, they were still having that guest reception in the
Yes.
main office, which was awful.
Did you go to that?
Yeah.
You didn't go to it willingly, I can imagine.
No, Noah went with me because, Miss Melinda, was like, you gotta take your friend to the...
We're still loving at World Harvest.
Yes.
It's funny.
And then, but I remember at that point, Pastor Linda praying for me, and I told her, when she asked me, in my head, I was like, how can I even begin to tell you what I need prayer for? So I just said clarity. And so she prayed for that, and it was like a beginning of like, I think this is what I actually need to be doing. I wasn't fully like all
You
in,
stuck a toe in,
surrendered,
right? Yeah.
but I was like, I think there's something different about this than
Okay.
every other.
So you're finally in church, and they announce Encounter, but it gets canceled. So what happens next?
So then there was another one in September of that year.
Mm-hmm.
And that one, I don't really even know, like, why I did this. He didn't even have to convince me. I willingly, like, went out there and filled out the card. And even after I did that, when I got in the car, I'm like, what have I done? Like, what have I, like, even though that wasn't even a commitment, I felt
Sure.
like I had just, like, committed.
All you did was fill out a card, which means we're going to call you and talk to you about Encounter. But you're like, oh, no.
Yes.
I signed my life away.
Yes. Because I was like, that's like the last thing I want to do. Because I'm still dealing with all of these things, even though I'm taking like little tiny baby steps
Sure.
towards like, because I still haven't gone like all in. I still wasn't fully convinced that God was real at this point.
Sure. So for our audience, just so you know, Encounter's a 2.5-day retreat that we do at our church, and it takes place at a hotel, and you room with someone usually that you don't know. So I can't imagine this was great on your social anxiety, but really it's a place for you to encounter God, right? To get set down away from the world's distractions and just encounter God. So just so the audience knows where you're at. So you sign up for Encounter and you go.
I do, but
Did you go kicking and screaming, or
kind of? Because the day of, I was convincing myself that like I was just going to not go.
Sure.
I was going to like forfeit the money that I had put towards it and just not go, because I was like, I can't go be with a bunch of people.
Right.
I can't have a random roommate. I can't do this. I can't. So it's like 5 minutes before I need to leave my house, because at the time I lived like 45 minutes from the church.
Sure.
It's like 5 minutes before I need to leave. I haven't packed any clothes or like really even looked at what they said to bring. And then I'm like, one of the main things bugging me was the roommate situation. And again, I feel something telling me, which I know now is God.
Sure.
Just go, it'll be fine. And so eventually I like muster up the motivation to throw some clothes into a bag, and I go.
So you go to Encounter and you encounter God in a pretty impactful way. And he starts to deal with the social anxiety and the OCD and everything. Tell us how that plays out for you. As much as you can. Tell us how that plays out for you.
So,
and you got a bonus at Encounter. We're going to talk about that too.
So, I go in the first session, I'm still like, I'm not really allowing myself to receive as much, because I'm in my head about like everything that's going on in my head and not what's happening as much in front of me. I'm trying to say things that I want to say without saying things that I
the reason she's struggling is because of at Encounter, we don't always tell everybody everything that's going on, because people experience it in a different way.
But actually, like, Bonnie was one of the people the first night that, like, when she started talking to me, it was something, like, in me, and that was, like, I started crying, and I was just releasing some of what was like built up in me. And even though I was crying, it actually felt like relieving after. And then I also remember her saying at the time, she was like, "Can I hug you?" and so she gave me a hug, and I was like very reluctant.
He was kind of like one of the tap.
She was like, rate your like comfortableness with hugging on a scale of like 1 to 10, and I was like 2. And she's like, well, by the end of this retreat, I'm gonna get you to at least a 5. And so okay, I can't say that one thing.
Tell us just how he worked through, what you were going through.
So then, after that night, I was more like able to not have so many like thoughts in my head to the point it was distracting me from anything that was happening in reality. And so every session I was learning more and more about who God actually was. It wasn't, and it was like not a history lesson. It was like, this is real, this is something for now, not just for those characters in the Bible. And then I started learning about deliverance and like strongholds of the enemy and those things. And we go through those, and I'm like, this is what I need to let go. Like, I don't want to be held by that anymore. I want to surrender it to God. And I ended up that day getting delivered from like all of that.
Amen.
To the point like where when it was all over, I felt physically like I was like 50 pounds lighter. Like I felt like I was floating, like
Amen.
Whatever weight was in me. And I felt like when it was getting delivered, like it come out of my mouth. And that was a lot of like, because I know that God had given me the gift of like rapping and words and all of that. But the enemy didn't want me to be able to use that. That's why I was attacked so much in that social side of it, especially.
Yeah, because you come out of Encounter, you get delivered from the social anxiety and the OCD and all the other things, and then you do what you do. You write a song. So tell us a little bit about that, and then we're going to get back to the extra thing you got at Encounter.
Yes. So I came out of Encounter, and I wrote this song called Freedom Anthem.
And we'll put that up for you guys to listen to. We'll put a link. It's so great.
Because that's just like the gift that God had given me of how to get out what was on the inside of me. Because even before, like now I can have conversations, but even before that, I was able to perform a song, which was weird with the social thing. I could do the song, but I couldn't talk to people in person.
Sure.
I can't really explain that. So I was like, I have to put this experience into words. If I'm going to put all that depressing stuff into music, how can I not put the
victory part?
Victory and the freedom into my music. So I wrote the song, and the main chorus is, I give it all to you, I'm done fighting, I need freedom. And it tells pretty much my testimony of going through all of that and realizing that the only thing that could set me free from what I was feeling was Jesus.
Amen. And so now all that darkness is out of you, and so you're one of the people with the light that are friendly and weird.
Yes.
So I keep hinting at that you got an extra kind of bonus, right, out of Encounter. Tell us a little bit about that story.
So at Encounter, I actually met my now roommate.
So what's next? Like, what's next for Mal B? What do you have coming up? Are your dreams about something that's coming up? Tell us a little bit about where you're headed.
I have music coming out with Creatives for Christ. We have like 3 songs.
I keep asking if I can be featured in a Mal B song someday. All right.
You're supposed to do a spoken word with me.
Oh yeah,
remember?
That's true. Let's do that. Stay tuned for the Bonnie Tilly and the Mal B collab.
So, most of my music that's coming out soon will be related to Creatives for Christ. So we have 3 songs coming out. They should be out within the next month.
Okay, very cool.
As far as personally, I'm working on doing more with my graphics and video stuff outside of the church setting. So I'm creating designs for t-shirts, for all kinds of different things to be able to use to as another source of income to hopefully, my goal is to fund mission trips.
Okay, very cool.
Yes.
Speaking of that, you're going on a mission trip soon to Spain.
I'm going to Spain.
Tell me a little bit about that, because it really plays into your gifts. So
I'm really excited for that.
Tell me a little bit about what you know about what happens over in Spain.
So we're going to partner with YWAM in Spain.
Youth with a Mission.
Youth with a Mission,
yep.
Yes. And they have many different sectors that are involved with that, but a lot of them are involved with sharing the gospel and reaching the people of Spain through the arts. So they use music, acting, dance, all of that as their ministry. So they go out on the streets, they do shows, they do intensive camps to teach other people those skills. Nice. So we're going to be doing street performances, per se.
Street evangelism too.
And then we'll also be hosting an intensive camp for people to come and hone their skills, but also have the opportunity to learn about Christ. And then we'll be putting on a bigger show at the end of the week while we're there.
So, as we start to wrap up, tell our audience, you can look at the camera if you like, but or not, it's either way. Tell them, how can they connect with you? Where can they find you on social media? How can they connect with you in other ways?
So all my social media platforms are at MalB Music. That's MALB Music. And then on all streaming platforms, my solo music is under MalB, and the music with Creatives for Christ is under Creatives, the number 4 Christ.
And the